Hello, everyone. Welcome back for Plenary 2 of the International Safety at Sea Conference. My name is Fiona Lowe, and I'll be your host for today. This conference is part of the International Safety at Sea Week, an annual event organized by the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore as part of its commitment to promote safety at sea. This year, we're heartened to have over 900 participants from more than 70 countries joining us, with key decision makers from governments around the world, as well as representatives from across different sectors of the maritime industry. Thank you all for joining us, and welcome back if you've logged in for our earlier sessions too. Earlier this afternoon, we discussed what more could be done for safer carriage of goods in shipping. Next, for Plenary 2, our focus is on rethinking crew training in a VUCA world. To start, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Graham Henderson, Chairman of the Together in Safety Initiative, to deliver his presentation on Seafarer Training, Working Together as a Global Shipping Industry. Dr. Henderson, please.
Fire has been reported in the building. Please listen for further instructions.
Thank you very much. There's a fire test, alarm test going on at the moment in the building that I'm in, so I'll try and do the best I can. But thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the important subject of crew training. I'd like to specifically focus on its strong link to safety and the work that we're undertaking to unite the shipping industry through the Together in Safety Coalition. Safety is the top agenda item for every CEO and the leadership team. Safety is the most important subject for me, for you, and for your business. But why do I say this? Let me refer to three reasons. The first reason is because the statistics show that shipping has one of the worst safety performances of any industry in the world. As such, the risks of a serious incident are high. Every shipping company must take the subject of safety very seriously. That is by everyone at every level in the company. Secondly is the business reason. Simply put, good safety is good business. An incident will severely impact your company, both in terms of costs and reputation. But if you treat your staff well and show that you care for them and have an excellent safety performance, then your staff will want to work for you and do a great job for you. Thirdly, and most importantly, our seafarers are people, our people. They're people like you and people like me, with families and children too. These seafarers work for us. They entrust their safety in us, and we need to look after them as if they were our family and our children. We must be clear that the decisions that we make each day are crucial as to whether those seafarers arrive home safely or not.
The test is now complete.
The safety performance
is now complete. Thank you for your cooperation.
Sorry about that. The safety performance in shipping has shown improvement over the years.
The test is now complete.
But it is a long way
is now complete.
from the performances
Thank you for your cooperation.
in other transport sectors such as air and rail. We must also be mindful that we're probably at a plateau in the shipping industry, and further improving the safety performance of our industry is going to take a united industry effort. On board our ships, there is also an increasing complexity of systems and processes, with more yet to come. The COVID-19 pandemic has seen a greater potential for mental and physical fatigue in our seafarers, with extended periods on board, time away from loved ones, and the ongoing uncertainty. A worrying statistic shows that mental and physical fatigue is an underlying cause of human error, estimated to be contributing to 75% of maritime incidents. So with the many challenges, how do we make these changes? Can we have the next slide, please? And can we have the next slide, please? Sorry. Okay. Shipping has many important and influential industry groups, many ship owners and managers, and many related supporting businesses. But what has become clear when speaking to those groups about safety is that something else needs to be done, something that will bring all the various groups together, something that will unite the shipping industry around safety and draw on the collective expertise. So 3 years ago, we formed a group called Together in Safety. Together in Safety is unique and comprises all of the shipping industry groups, including the International Chamber of Shipping, BIMCO, OCIMF, Intertanko, Intercargo, Interferry, Cruise Liners International, and the World Shipping Council. It also includes many major shipping companies, such as Carnival, Gaslog, Euronav, Maersk, MSC, Shell, V-Ships, also the UK P&I Club, Lloyd's Register, and country representation through the Danish Maritime Council and Australian Maritime Safety Authority. Links have also been established with the International Air Transport Association, IATA, and the Rail Standards and Safety Board, the RSSB, so that we can learn from air and rail. Together in Safety has developed a strategy centered around 3 core themes of leadership, well-being and care, and training. Next slide, please. In the area of training, Together in Safety is focused on how we can improve the quality of that training by simplifying and standardizing the training materials available in industry, using the many best practices that have been developed based on years of collective experience across many shipping groups. The training programs that are available now in Together in Safety, and there are more to come, are designed to be engaging and easy to use, being appropriate in style of learning and content to everyone on the ship, from the bridge team to the engine room personnel to the deck crew. This standardized training is supported by another area of our work in Together in Safety called Shipping Activity Frontline Execution Reference Cards, or SAFE reference cards. Incident investigations often point to one of the causes being the failure to follow procedures. In essence, the procedures were in place, but the practice was lacking. The reality is that procedures, while necessary, are often weighty documents and exist alongside several hundred other procedures within a safety management system. It is unreasonable to expect everyone to remember all requirements within these documents. So Together in Safety is looking to rethink how we make this process less complex to our seafarers by simplifying procedures for high-risk activities into easy to read, straightforward to understand formats in the form of SAFE reference cards. We're also looking forward to new challenges in training, such as around the safety of future fuels, hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, for example. This is an area that is in progress again, working as one shipping industry. I'm proud of the achievements of Together in Safety, and I'm excited about the continuing work in the future on the critically important subject of safety. Can I have the next slide, please? Upskilling and training our crews to adapt and be ready to take forward the changing demands of our industry will be critical to our success. I believe that when we work together in the shipping industry, we can make huge strides. Next slide, please. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I'd encourage you and your organizations to be part of this very special journey. Come and find out more about Together in Safety, how we can all work together and what we can give back to make shipping safer. Working as one team, we can make safety number one on everyone's agenda. We can be Together in Safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Next, I would like to invite Captain Pradeep Chawla, Managing Director, QHSE and Training, Anglo-Eastern Ship Management Limited, to deliver his presentation on competencies and learning methodologies for the future. Captain Pradeep, please.
Good evening, everyone from Hong Kong. The weather, though, in Hong Kong today is very much like Singapore, so I feel at home without the chili crabs in Singapore. My presentation is titled Competencies and Learning Methodologies for the Future, and thank you for the organizers, not only for inviting me, but for allowing me to change the title. Because I can imagine many of us struggling to find Google and say, hey, what does VUCA mean, man? So thank you, and let's continue with my views. Okay, so our world has changed over the years since at least I came out to sea in 1974. And I don't mean that all the comedy shows in America are boring now without Donald Trump. I mean the maritime world. So that's what life was in 70s and 80s. That's the kind of engine rooms and ships that we could recognize in the 70s and 80s to the more modern ships in the bottom row. And what has also changed is the technologies that are used now to run ships. These are all screenshots from present day Anglo-Eastern fleet. The second officer doesn't have to make a passage plan anymore because he gets an AI assisted software to send him the route, which he just has to accept after checking. The machinery data is all live in the screens of everyone in the office. The ports are deciding when the ship should arrive. The utmost dispatch, of course, still stays. And augmented reality cameras on board are becoming common. I think how we communicate has also changed. I think anybody who has 12-year-old children at home will understand when I say that if you want to get the attention of your 12-year-old on dinner table, you better text him, because otherwise he's not going to be talking to you. And I think it's an important one for all of us to know that by 2025, 75% of the workforce out at sea and in all industries are going to be millennials. Now, nothing against millennials, but they have some special qualities that we will talk about, which are due to the world that we all live in. So I think the competencies for the future need to change. So what are these qualities of the young people? They all love technology. They love video games. They use blogs and social media for their learning. They would rather believe a forward in WhatsApp than believe the textbook that they are reading. They would like to know why before we ask them to do something, and before they even want to know how to do something. One important part about them is they don't like to obey power. They like to work with individuals and teams. And this is shocking research, but the span of attention of all of us is reducing. It's down to 8.25 seconds according to one of the research that I've read about. And that's lower than the goldfish, which is pretty concerning for all of us. And one big quality of all of the young generation is trying to get instant feedback. They are used to the like sign, they want the haha sign, they want the emojis, and I can bet not many of us can understand the meanings of all the emojis that a 12-year-old today knows. So the competencies that are changing due to the change in the way ships are being run and managed are also important for all of us to plan for training for the future. So one of them would be the ability to recognize limitations and dangers of automation. Just because something is on the screen with 4 decimal places to it does not mean that it is accurate. The pointer on the dashboard of a screen could also not be showing you the right data from a machinery due to some software bug. The ability to process large amounts of data, that's the typical screen of a failure in the engine room today. You get lots and lots of quick lines coming in of data with red and green. and the analysis needs to be done on the basis of that, and no more engineers touching and feeling and hearing the sound of vibration of the pumps. So we need to be able to convert data into actionable items and have insights about them. They will also need to learn to focus on critical issues, because the amount of data that is available today on the bridge of a navigating bridge of any ship is, hundreds of data points are available. I mean, you try to maneuver into the software of any egg disk, and if you go to one egg disk to another, and then you know that you can't find half the things because the menus are so different. They will need to learn also to work with remote teams, because a lot of decision making is going to be joint decision making. So if you have all the engine data coming into your office, obviously you're going to be discussing then with the chief engineer about what to do and what not to do. The change is amazing, the amount of change that is happening in digitalization world and in the greenhouse gas emission world. So all of the seafarers will need to be able to learn continuously. No more pass exam, okay, nothing to worry about for the next 10 years. That's not going to happen. Ability to cope with different changes that are happening, manage those changes, accept the changes. We all know that not everybody accepts every new innovation quickly. There are always people who like others to try out things first, buy the latest iPhone, let someone else do it, let the bugs get out, and then I'll buy it. Ability to cope with increased stress, because yes, it is happening that the stress is increasing on board. And the ability to communicate effectively, because a lot of stuff which with all these systems is going to be having teams working together, and which will mean that their ability to lead is going to be a lot more. So at least in my mind, there is no doubt that now we are at the time in the history of maritime evolution to redesign how we teach and what we teach. Some of the things that I think will be changing in the future will be virtual reality will get adopted more and more. These are programs from Anglo-Eastern. So we find this an extremely useful tool. For example, if you're teaching young cadets on what's the construction of a 4-peak tank, you just give him VR glasses and make him walk through the tank, which you could not do in the old days of a classroom. We had, Kemp and Young and Derrick's books with 2D sketches when we were learning 4-peak tanks. Gaming apps, this is going to be a big thing for those of you who are interested. Anglo-Eastern has put up a game called Vessel Inspector for free on the internet on both Google and iOS. Please play with it if you enjoy it. Micro-learning and videos, short-form videos, Netflix, Aflix, that kind of thing. And bite-sized learning. I think a lot of learning, because people are using WhatsApp and other social platforms to absorb knowledge, why not use the same kind of mediums to get to the young people and give them learning in bite sizes? Remember, the attention span is like goldfish. One area where I think there will be even more progress will be simulators, because this is something that is a very useful tool. And in COVID times, we've all tried out these cloud simulation stuff. It works, but there are limitations to it. I won't go into that. That needs a separate conference. But we do think that more and more simulators will get even better at simulating the reality from board. And right now, LNG simulators is something that is catching on. Instant feedback. What we think is going to happen more and more is that in order to keep the learners engaged, especially in online they need to be active learners. And in order to keep them engaged, this is a good tool, things like Mentimeter, etc. And these will help the teacher to understand quickly whether whatever he explained flew over the heads of the students or not. We've been doing this for about 10 years in our training center, and it really helps the teacher and the student. What is not going to go away, I think, in the future and should not go away is some form of hands-on training for certain skills. It's very different to be able to lift a piston in an animated program on a simulator and actually doing it with chain blocks. So some part will remain in hands-on training. And it's like the old saying, you don't throw away the baby with the wash water. So everything old doesn't have to be thrown away. And I know I'm getting to the end of my time. Mentoring, this is a skill that is dying out at sea because there is less time, rest hour regulations, faster turnaround, and platforms like these, which will allow people to get in touch with their mentors wherever they are in the world, is something that is coming in the future. We have found it to be useful. And soft skills will become even more critical: teamwork and communication. These are from the Intertango Behavioral Competency document with these domains, and there are 24 total, including subdomains. And I think training institutions will need to focus on this very much in the future. And the wonderful part is that there is so much more change coming in with all these things about alternate fuels, decarbonization, etc., that all of us will still be in such conferences discussing 5 years from now, what more should we do, what other technology should we use, how do we handle our world in the VUCA world. And I think it's all of us just need to decide, are we on board with change, or are we going to miss the boat in each of our businesses, whatever we do? Because as everyone knows, that autonomous ships are not coming in the next 5 years, but I'm sure they'll come in whatever, 20 years, 25 years. Some limited editions will come in short sea trade, etc. But in the meantime, we need to ensure that the seafarers remain competent for what they are doing. And for that, we will need to change what we teach and how we teach. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Pradeep and Dr. Henderson, for setting the stage for our panel discussion next on rethinking crew training in a VUCA world. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, please note that you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to pose questions to our panelists. Our moderator for today's panel discussion is Mr. Michael Poon, Executive Director of the Singapore Shipping Association. Joining him on the panel, we have our speakers, Dr. Graham Henderson, Chairman, Together in Safety; Captain Pradeep Chawla, Managing Director, QHSE and Training, Anglo-Eastern Ship Management Limited; Captain Hari Subramaniam, Regional Head, Business Relations and MEDIC, the Shipowners Mutual Protection and Indemnity Association; and Mr. Daniel Zhang, Center Director, Center of Excellence in Maritime Safety, Singapore Polytechnic. Do note that if you have any questions for our panelists, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Mr. Poon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for the introduction. So first of all, I'd like to say a warm welcome to all of our listeners and our people that are dialing in from wherever you are. I'd like to begin with maybe a couple of things so that we can set the stage as we move forward. You know, we have put out a question, and the question was, in your opinion, are the current crew training methods working as well as they should? And I thought maybe we'd take some time to put this out on the screen for our audience to check it out. Now, what's really interesting is the fact that there is still a high number, in fact, almost half, 48% of the poll respondents that say that the current crew training methods are not working, and that's worrying. Captain Pradeep and Dr. Henderson, you spoke about the importance and how trends are changing. I think you know what really capped off the first speaker was Dr. Henderson. I think your timing. I mean, no one could have asked for better timing just when you're about to begin, and we could hear a fire drill taking place behind the scenes. I mean, that really underscores the fact that even where we are at, fire safety drills needs to also be in place so that we can instill upon that safety culture that needs to be there. But you know, that's besides the point. I think the point is that you have mentioned very clearly that in Together in Safety, your three pillars that you have always anchored on was on leadership. It was on well-being of the crew. And last but not least, also on training itself. You talked about the increasing complexities on ships, echoed by Captain Pradeep. You talk about the increasing demands on the crew, also echoed by Captain Pradeep itself. Captain Pradeep, you begin by saying, I didn't really know what VUCA was until I Googled it. So VUCA, and you've used it quite well at the end of your presentation, it really meant volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and of course, ambiguity in this current world that we have today. And Captain Pradeep, I really like the fact that you kind of mentioned about the fact that one of the key things that's happening today is that the profile of our crews are changing. And I'll come to that in a short while, right? Because it's about attention span, it's about what we need to do. But what I'd like to also share with the audience is that on your screen that was showing earlier on, I would like the team to put that poll pie chart up again. 48% of you said no. And let me give you some of the glaring comments that was out there. Let me just go ahead and refer to this, right? Human factor and information overload, taking into consideration even the COVID-19 current situation that we have, prevents face-to-face interaction and more on Teams and Zoom. And there's such a lot of passive audience, we don't know what's happening. So with the convenience of video conferencing, we are misusing this tool, and that will result in a lot of information overload. Crew training has also fallen behind technological advancements of vessels. Again, I think Captain Pradeep, you mentioned that very clearly. Better training needs to be done to require the crew to really understand and utilize the advances in technology. But we are also hampered by a couple of things. Moving forward, and I'm looking at the panel as well, moving forward, if our mixed profile of our workers are in the millennials, the attention span being shorter than a goldfish, yeah? Captain Pradeep, I took notes, you mentioned about this, right? Change is always coming. Change is a constant, we have to deal with it. And if that happens, then no matter what we do, we will continue to see no letdown in disasters, in accidents that's taking place, and then what will happen, right? So I think with that context in mind, and perhaps maybe I'd like to open up with a couple of things. We have Daniel here on my left, who is looking after and setting up training institutes. And obviously, I think, Daniel, with the benefit of the turn of events that's brought up by COVID-19, right? With more contactless engagements that we've seen, what would today work in favor of the various training methods that would actually engage these millennials? In essence, what is your opinion on what method is most optimal? Is it VR? Is it hands-on? Is it simulators?
Yeah, I think thanks, Michael, for setting the stage. He did a fantastic homework going through the survey results, and it's glaring and it's worrying, right? I think when we actually go back to the word VOCA, I did a Google as well. So Google says the VOCA word came out in 1987, so that was 30 years ago, right? So I think in short term, when we talk about VOCA, COVID is an accelerator. I think as an industry is really looking at the key changes, what are the things that's happening in technology advancement, how do we deal with that, information overload. I do hear feedback from industry to say that there's this term called assisted incidents because of information overload. So I think in the short term, there's already things that I think industry is really doing or can do to look at how do we enhance training, to look at how do we deal with information, how do we actually use technology in a way that really enhances human performance rather than impeding our performance. I think that's one. I think the second part is really in terms of the training that we are already looking at. In the past, remote training, online training is not prevalent. COVID has actually changed that, has accelerated that. Of course, we recognize there's limitation of online training. These are the things that as an industry, we are actually getting accustomed to. These are the new ways of doing things. And we must also recognize there are limitations in terms of if you do remote training, you don't have the opportunity to for the face-to-face engagement, and you don't have the leadership position in place whereby you can actually command, some of the deep skills that you need to pick up. I think you will still have to look at a combination of a hybrid approach whereby you have face-to-face, you have online training as well. But online training definitely is a way that we actually should explore and design it in a way that is effective and it complements your face-to-face training. I think that's something that we can actually do in a short term, right? Yeah.
Daniel, thank you. I think that's a good insight coming from a training provider viewpoint. But Captain Hari, now that you hear from Daniel, from a practitioner perspective, yep, and recognizing the challenges that we have, Captain Pradeep talked about this, less than a goldfish attention span. That to me, it's amazing, right? And millennials today are asking about why this needs to be done instead of wanting to know how it's going to be done. So from your perspective, give us your views, right, on how you can, what do you think that can be delivered as an effective training in the new normal today?
Sure. Thanks, Michael, for setting the scene. And with respect to about the new millennials, I can relate totally to my son, growing teenager, and do this. Why? Just do it. It doesn't work like that. But firstly, I've been fortunate to be allowed this hands-on role in crew training and seafarers' well-being by my employers, the Ship Owners Club. They are firm believers that the seafarers are the most important link in this shipping industry, and we have to give back to our society. During the pandemic also, we employed this whatever it takes attitude, and as early as April 2020, we had started reaching out to shipping companies, trying to deliver on all the news on COVID procedures, etc. There was so much of turmoil. We wanted to engage with the crew, and they used to have ships logging in from all parts of the world, and we used to have combined training sessions with the office and the crew. And this was very good because we could stay in touch with them, make them feel wanted, and at the same time we could continue with training. It didn't have to stop over there. And I'm glad we took it over there. I mean, I must take this opportunity to commend all our seafarers, over the last 2 years, where they've kept us afloat. Literally, they kept the world afloat very proudly when most of the other means of transport were grounded. No pun intended on those. I've also been supported immensely in these ventures by very prestigious industry bodies such as the Nautical Institute and the Company of Master Mariners of India. And I have the honor of representing both of them in Singapore as a council member. Now back to the question, I mean, we can see based on our poll, 48% and 52% is very close. It's not exactly a winner as such. So there are pros and cons on this, there is no right or wrong answer, and this is not a disclaimer at all. One of the major advantages we have seen is actually the footprint. We can outreach because of virtual training platforms. You're not confined to one training room and a group of representatives. You can go global. You can catch people in Europe's, in America's, in Australia's, in Asia's, but all you need is just a convenient time, and it's virtually free. So this is something you can actually capture a lot of people, various teams, various communities coming in for training under one roof. Language barrier. Again, now very often you have to be very careful, you have to have translators, but now these online virtual tools allow you to give multiple languages at one time. So we had crews, Indonesian crew, Filipino crew, Indian crew dialing in, and using the tools we had, they could just scan a barcode, and whatever I was speaking or delivering to them, they could see it in subtitles, in whatever preferred language they want. So this gave a lot of more engagement as such, and we could actually have them participating much more. Again, if you have a lot of participants who are shy to ask questions, for some reason they are not very forthcoming, they prefer using the chat function. They could easily ask the group, or they could even go to the trainer directly. So this gets a lot of more people to interact. We could argue about this all day, whether we should leave the camera on, whether it's rude or not. But we have a certain segment of participants in every training session where they are shy by nature, and they're so scared to be judged by people actually watching them on the screen. What will they think of? Should I cough now? Should I sneeze now? They just prefer having the camera off. And we also feel that they're not participating. But I can tell you, we are looking at the positive aspects of it. We've had many people who have their camera off, but they're very active on the chat. They actually participate. So there are goods and bads of it. like I think Captain Chawla said, audience polling is quite important. You can do it instantaneously and compile the results. So the trainer also knows what has been delivered and how well it's been delivered and received. And actually, one very important point, what Michael also said, is in most training sessions, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical, participants' compulsion to surf their hand phones is a must. So whatever you do, every few seconds they'll go back to their hand phone. So what we decided to kill two birds with one stone. We started delivering these sessions on their hand phones rather than they look at a screen. Everybody logs in from their hand phone, so we have their active participation. And this helps with AI purposes also. You know who's on, who's off. We deliver the tools actually over there of participation, question answers on their hand phones. So this doesn't give them too much time to digress from the subject matter. So they are on their favorite place on their hand phones. So there are various pros how you can actually do it. I'm sure there are many cons, like I said earlier, but the glass is half full here. So the positives is what we've discussed. Yeah, over to you, Michael.
But so Hari, I thought that was quite refreshing for the very fact that you brought up the idea to engage the classes, and that is instead of the usual multiple choice questions on the screen, you push it where they are using it, which is on their handphone. I think that's creative. But I want to challenge you on that for a little while more, because and I also want to challenge the panel at the same time too. So Dr. Henderson, Captain Pradeep, join in wherever you can and chime in at the same time. I have a question that is just coming off from a master and crew of a ship that is just off Papua New Guinea right now. And they've dialed in and they've said that, how can crew training be made more effective and not just a tick box exercise? Now, before I pose this to the panelists, I want to read off also one of the reasons given for that Paul saying why they don't think crew training is effective. And these are quite representative of what this Q&A came off from this crew on the MV Alam Kakal of Papua New Guinea. It says here, training should be focused in real skills and not just certification of knowledge and certificates itself. Training is repetitive, being carried out for the sake of documentary purposes, but not, mind you, but not with a mindset to improve safety and response to crisis. Dr. Henderson, being the founder is also the chair of the Training and Safety Group. What are your thoughts about this?
I think that we need to relate training to actual incidents. I think in terms of whether it's effective or not, if I am receiving training of a real life serious incident, to me that gets my attention, and I'd think it would get the attention of the crew too. And one of the methods that we have used very effectively and is included in the Together in Safety training packages is something called reflective learning. So here, the incident is relayed, but then it's stopped at a certain point. And then the question is asked to the people who are in the audience being trained, what happened next? What decision would you have made? And what can you see happening? And then you can see the decision that was made by the crew who had the incident, and then you move on, stop the video, and then say what happened next. So in terms of effectiveness, it's a real incident, and certainly it would get my thinking too. I think that is something we can work on. It can be delivered virtually. And the other good thing, and I was just reflecting on what was said by my fellow panelists, is that you can have a professional trainer. One of the issues I think we have is that not everybody is good at training. And just to say, well, you happen to be on the ship and you're going to deliver the training on the ship. Even a captain, I mean, we can't just assume that if he or she has an understudy that he or she can undertake that training. So I think in doing things remotely, you can actually get the benefit of professional teachers, people who really know how to deliver training and know how to make sure that everyone who is participating has the attention and is learning, and then can test whether they've learned.
Dr. Zan, thank you very much. I thought that was quite insightful because it kind of leads me also to what Captain Pradeep early on mentioned, and I'm going to refer to his slide. You know, Captain Pradeep, you talk about the fact that there were a lot of changes taking place. There was technology advancements, the way people work, the profile of the workforce is taking place. But from the poll that took place in response to the survey, it says here, crew training has fallen behind technological advancements of the vessels. Better training now needs to be required for crew to really understand and utilize the advances in technology itself. So in your opinion, Captain Pradeep, being a QHSE manager itself, where do you think today are the lapses and the gaps that we need to cover?
I think it's a pretty complex subject because what happens in any industry is that some universities stay on top of the game and they keep updating their course content for whatever subject people are doing. And a lot of universities and colleges tend to stick on to the past and continue teaching in the same way as they were teaching. And in shipping, there has also been a lot of other events, I would say. So the crew supply nations today who are there are not the ones who were the crew supplying nations 25 years ago. So we moved everything. The OECD countries had the crew on board. That over the last 25, 30 years has changed to an Asia-centric crew or East European-centric crew. And the centers of excellence of teaching were not necessarily moving to these areas at the same pace as what was happening with the change of the demographics of the crew. And as part of my hat as chairman of Global Met, which is a collection of various training institutes around the world, this is one of the areas that we have identified that the end user, being the ship ownership manager, they need to be involved at all times with the training institutions. And companies like ours, with large number of fleet of ships, we have gone and opened our own colleges for pre-sea training and done, training centers around the world of our own. But not every small ship owner or small manager can do that. So we have a program in that whereby the Global Met members get more connected to the end users, and we encourage all the members to be in touch with the industry. Now, the good ones, they already do that, but overall in the world, we do need to bring up the connection to be stronger between the end users and the people who are actually doing the teaching. And there's another fundamental problem here. Not only in our industry, pretty much exists in a lot of other industries. Teachers, by nature of the job, tend to be the least paid individuals in any industry, whether it is, I can cite many industries where this is area of concern. And that kind of relates to how much money out of the overall running of a ship goes towards training. And I don't want to be speaking numbers, but it is in our industry, it's an extremely small percentage of the operating cost of a ship that goes towards training. So the entire world says seafarers are our assets, we rely on you, etc. But when it comes to looking after the upskilling of the individuals, the amount of money spent in the industry is extremely small. I know it can't be regulated. We've had conferences about this subject in various parts of the world. So we need to kind of look at the entire ecosystem. And I agree with Graham that when we do things together in safety, that's when we bring up the standards across the world. And the ones who are slightly ahead of the game are supposed to help. This should be a pro bono job for all of us to be able to bring up the standards, because if there is crew on another ship which is not well trained and they come hit a beautiful new LNG ship, the disaster is going to be for the planet, not just for that individual company who didn't spend money on training. So it's a massive subject where we need to all work together going into the future. Thank you.
So Captain Pradeep, thank you for that insight on that. You know, you had also spent a bit of time earlier on in your slide that talks about the fact that today the millennials are really not wanting to know how to do it. They want to ask, why am I doing it so? And I thought that, you know, perhaps this question is on the screen coming up soon, right now, that is from the master and crew of the MV Plover Pacific, which is somewhere right now in the Pacific Ocean, sending us this message and this question. I thought it was really relevant because, you know, you talk about the fact that millennials are asking, why do I need to do this instead of how am I going to do this? That means now that there is a need. There is a need for mentors or senior seafarers or crew that's with them, the junior staff, to let them know why this must be done, right? So I think this is a really relevant question. It says here on the screen, what are the innovative tools being created today to assist senior seafarers to conduct a very robust on-the-job training of juniors? Now, perhaps Daniel, you know, this is somewhere I think we need to talk about because obviously when we talk about innovative tools, the first thing that comes to mind is online. But I want to talk about online yet. I want to talk about something even much more spectacular, which is simulators. I'll talk about online maybe with Captain Hari and with Captain Pradeep in a short while, but what's your view about simulators, Daniel?
Yeah, I think simulators are not new, right? So maritime simulators is something that at Singapore Poly, right, we have the Singapore Maritime Academy, we have bridge simulators, we have engine simulators. So these are things that we actually train them. It gives you the sense and the feel before you even sail on a real ship, right? So I think coming back to the question of how do we ensure the training is effective, we realize that even in terms of the training assessment, right, it's not only about ticking the box, you know, you just pass this exercise. I think earlier there was a very good summary by Captain Pradeep on human factors, right? In terms of the behavior competency, in terms of a situational awareness, decision making, these are all the factors which I think in the past we have not put enough emphasis on, right? So one of the things that we are actually doing, right, if you call it a spectacular, right, we are actually doing AI assessment of behavior competency. So how do we qualify a good situational awareness on the bridge training, right? Whether the person is spending enough time performing lookout, whether the person is spending enough time to assess certain situation, whether he make a decision fast enough. So we are actually venturing into a behavior competency framework. This is something that the Intertanko has actually come up with a framework, but I think this is something that collectively as a shipping industry, we are actually venturing into that. So actually that's one of it. The other simulator, if you talk about it, you can call VR simulation as a simulator as well, right? Just now, Captain Pradeep also brought about the future of shipping, which is sustainable, right? When we talk about sustainability, then the new fuel actually comes in. When we deal with cryogenic fuels, how do we ensure sufficient training is actually in place for ship-to-shore bunkering, ship-to-ship bunkering, for example, LNG, and in future we talk about hydrogen and all that. So actually in Sing Poly, we are actually a research institution, so we are actually exploring all the new ways of doing training. VR training is one of it. So we actually built a LNG leakage detection and firefighting module. And then in that assessment, what is more interesting is that we actually build in assessment tool. AI assessment tool, which actually give you the outcome of how the student has performed under a VR environment. You know, whether he has performed sufficient look around to get sufficient situational awareness, right? Whether he actually make the decision fast, he triggered the alarm fast, and he evacuate how long does it take for him to evacuate. So all these things are actually put in place to enhance training. These are innovative tools that we are actually building in the Training Institute. In fact, this is something that at the opening address, Minister Chi has actually highlighted this as how do we actually harness and leverage on technology to enhance training for the maritime industry.
All right, Daniel, just hold on for a while. So I want to thank you for that, but I'm gonna probe Captain Hari in a short while. So let me just try to recap what you just mentioned. Right, simulators are good. It can be augmented with AR and VR and everything else, right?
Yeah.
But there's also a comment from the poll that talks about this, and audience, listen to this, yeah? Current crew training method only expand their knowledge from what they have read and thought in school, but what have been taught sometimes differ from what they will be doing when they're on board. Now, that means the simulator must really be as close to the real thing, yeah? Real training should be done on board, where in the olden days, training ships were being used. Now, I can really tell, even if I can't see you guys, Captain Sea Salt, Chief Engineer Greasy Hands, you're nodding your hand saying that best way is always hands-on. I can see it. I mean, Dr. Henderson, you're laughing because I know you can relate to this. What better way than to teach a newbie with their hands on deck, knowing what needs to be done, what valve needs to be turned, instead of just, when you go by a car, you kick a tire, but that's not what it is. It's really knowing what needs to be done. So I guess simulators does help in a certain sense, in a certain extent, right? So Captain Hari, what I want to hear from you is this, right? Are there specific vocational training that cannot be replicated in a simulator? In your viewpoint, what are the things that can or cannot be transitioned into offline, but needs to be conducted in person? Captain Hari.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yeah. I think some fantastic points all around, from Captain Pradeep and from Daniel and Dr. Henderson. So the last 2 years have shown us that basically when there is no choice, we have to survive. And this is what we've changed our mindset, which needs the biggest change. Mindset change, and we have managed to do everything digitally or remotely for the last 2 years, just because we didn't have a choice. So we managed. Whether it's ideal or not is not something that we can agree on, because there are certain things I do agree. I mean, we need to do it in person. Like people say, there is a large chasm between what is the available training and what is currently required, because we have technological, it's not been able to keep up with the technological and digitalization of shipping. And we need to close that gap to stop this discussion. But then again, the question I would ask is, I mean, we've got a lot of things, technological advances like what Daniel and his team are doing at CEMS, but how many people know about it? Because mandatory requirements are falling short. Yes. And very often, if you have all these, now people have asked questions. If I tell them Daniel's giving this fantastic product, will you adopt it on board? And the first thought that's going to cross the ship manager's mind is, but this is the mandatory requirements, it's so much. Why do I need to go till there? I mean, what's it going to rock the cart or something? That's how we need to get out of the mindset, and we have to be ready to adopt this. It's like herd immunity. We talk about COVID vaccination. Yeah. Unless everybody starts embracing it and starts moving with it, then we just can't have few good companies like Captain Chawla's institution, and Anglo-Eastern, that adopts it and has world-class seafarers, whereas a lot of others are dilly-dallying with it. So this is something. Now, coming back to your question as such, there are a lot of courses which require the examiner actually to assess the body language, the reaction, to see the twitches of the eyebrows and to try and evaluate what's going on. AI does a fantastic job, but there are courses such as bridge team management where you need to have the bridge team as a team in one room. You can't have them in different rooms. You miss that body warmth. You need to touch the flesh and find out, have everybody within the same shouting distance, and kind of, you have to operate like a team. So that finally cannot be done virtually, although AI can make a fantastic job out of it with all this reading of information, etc. That's very good. Again, VR is fantastic in many ways, but take, for example, a firefighting module. You're going on a rescue mission wearing a VR. You don't feel the fire burning. You don't smell the smoke. It doesn't literally overpower you and get your adrenaline flowing. So unless you put them in a furnace and ask them to wear the VR, it's not going to be. You're walking around in an air-conditioned room, whereas your visuals are telling you you're fighting a fire. it doesn't add up. So
Yeah.
it's unless we can create that environment where you probably make them sit inside the boiler
Yeah.
and then this thing. But that's somewhere where we'll have to find out how we can actually bring that together. Don't get me wrong, I'm not berating it. It is fantastic in other non-emergency situations like pre-joining, boarding, familiarization, etc. People can actually use that and be very familiar while going on board. But yes, very often there is a lot of hands-on and collective team training you need to do.
Yeah.
That cannot be replaced, I think.
But Harry, that's the key point, because that leads me to two questions. Actually, it's kind of collapsed into one, which I want to direct it to Dr. Henderson. So that's on the screen right now for you. The first question is pretty much this. There are so many technological interventions possible for training at this point in time. Is there a risk that we get so excited with technology and we do not see it as an enabler and end up missing the focus on the learners? I think that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? Dr. Henderson, I think that's key for us, because the next question I wanted to ask you, which I want the team to put on the screen for us, is how is the future of training being envisaged by industry leaders? Dr. Henderson, in your capacity together in safety, can you share with us what do you think, and how will this lead us in the direction of training in the future? Dr. Henderson, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. But before I get to that question, I just want to also make sure we don't lose a point that I think we should also reflect on later, and that's around the important role of the leadership in a company. Of course, in this session, we've strongly gone down into the training methods and delivery of that training. But I think the CEO and the leadership team have a really, really strong role to play. If they set the direction, set the expectation around training, the importance of it, people in the company listen. I mean, everyone listens to what the CEO says and the leadership team say. And also they must make sure that they take that forward in terms of both making monies available, but also being part of that training themselves, and also verification. So maybe I don't want to lose that point at some time and just focus purely on training. In terms of types of training and technology, I think some of the colleagues on the panel have pointed to this. I think there is good opportunity from technology that is coming through. But at the same time, I don't think it's the panacea. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. I do believe that some of the training that has existed for many, many years, with maybe a little bit of extra technology, is still very relevant. We talked there about training as a bridge team. I think that's very relevant. You have to get everyone together as a bridge team, and then you can add something like I talked about in terms of the reflective learning, where you can play out a real incident and then see how the bridge team will react to that, get them thinking, and also they will get knowledge of, well, how did the bridge team that had the accident, how did they see it, and the differences in the thinking, and reflect on that. So I think where we can have a blended solution, shall I say, of some of the very good training methods that we've had in the past, plus some of the new ways of learning too. The other aspect is this whole thing about learning, and we mentioned it earlier, about learning from more experienced people. And I think that we've got to get into everyone's way of thinking. And I think this, again, is where the leadership, and that's why I mentioned it, plays a crucial role in something that I call learner mindset. So not where a crew member, this training is being imposed on that crew member, and it's, as we've said, just a way of just getting through and getting the certificates, but actually wanting to be curious. Encouraging people to want to learn, to look at things in a different way, not as people checking up on them and testing them as such, but but actually an open way of challenging. And I think that plays very strongly to the younger people coming into the shipping industry as well. As was said, Michael, not just the training itself, but why am I doing this training? And getting that learner mindset concept right the way from the top, the CEO, right the way down through the company to everybody who's working on the ship.
Dr. Graham, thank you. I think that's pretty insightful. I like the fact that you mentioned very clearly it stems from leadership. It also couples down to the fact that from the student's perspective, there is a need to want to learn. But I'm going to challenge that at the same time, because aren't we today training to a global minimal standard? I think that's what it is, right? In our rush, in our haste to get the job done, it appears that many companies are taking the shortcut. They want to check it off their list. It meets the standards. That's what they're doing. And this is a comment that was made from DePaul. It says here, we are training to a global minimum standard. And that minimal standard is a very low bar for the job to be done in this fast-paced world with limited resources. So to us, I think that's very worrying. And I still want to come back to you again, Dr. Henderson, and also to Daniel and Shaw, because it's pretty much linked. Dr. Henderson, do you think that shipping companies today take training as seriously as the airline industry? You know that, right? The airline industry takes it very seriously. They are carrying a cargo that's actually human lives. So there's a level of competency involved here that is always at the forefront. And there's a level of safety that's always at the forefront as well. So an airline pilot versus Captain Sea Salt, their cargo is very different. And there is a different priority when it looks at that. And even for inspections, Mr. Inspector for the airline or the airplane and Mr. Inspector for the vessel have different priorities. So I think in your perspective, I was going to come back to your question again. Do you really think that shipping companies today are taking training as seriously as the airlines?
I think that some shipping companies are, and certainly in Shell, and I know some of a lot of other companies are taking it as seriously. So in addition to the statutory training, which is required for certification, those companies also have other mandatory training. They also have what we call recommended training. So where there's an identified competency gap to bridge that with training. So I think that those companies are taking it as seriously. And the reason they're taking it as seriously is partly because of the fact that they do understand the importance of training from the point of view of the company itself, the reputation of the company, but also in terms of the well-being of the crew. So there are companies, but there are, as you say, companies that just do the minimum training. And this is where I think Together in Safety can help. This is where working with the likes of Intertanko, Intercargo, etc., we can reach those companies. And certainly the support that we've had from Intertanko, Intercargo, all of those industry groups has been phenomenal. And as was said earlier, some of those companies that are being able to do extra training, their knowledge, some of their skills, and some of the training events that they're using, that can be easily translated onto other companies. So we get a much better and more level training across. And it comes back again to leadership. And we have to get through the Intertankos, the Intercargos, we have to get the CEOs very, very much wanting to put in place training, very much wanting to put in place verification that the training is working, verification that what they think is happening is actually happening in practice. And I think with that and some of the other things we're doing, we really will, as a global shipping industry working together, be able to get on top reducing the number of incidents, which, let's face it, also has a benefit in that that will reduce the premiums that are paid through the insurance, which have been going up, as we know, which every company has a challenge with.
You know, Dr. Henderson, I think those are really good points, because that's pretty much your view and the envisioning of what future will hold in terms of training. But Captain Pradeep, I don't want to keep you there while you're listening, because I can tell you want to say something else on this. What are your points as well? Do you really think that the future of training will likely be shaped also by changing landscapes of what you've shared in your slides as well? And in the meanwhile, while Captain Pradeep begins this on that, I think, Daniel, I want to come back to you on also simulators and airlines at the same time, since you talked about simulators. So Captain Pradeep, back to you.
Okay. The future will change in how we teach and what we teach. However, one has to look at also the ecosystem, the regulatory framework that we put into place. Any of us who attended the previous STCW revisions and who are pushing for changes to come back and have a review of the STCW convention will remember the number of arguments that took place when people were trying to say that there is no more need for sextants and sites to be taken every day. So whatever we create in the regulatory framework also needs to be looked at when we want to change and how training has to take a path forward. I want to come back on one of the points that Hari answered earlier. Hands-on training on board. Yes, best place to do it. Why doesn't it happen? Two major things. One, the regulatory framework changed the minimum sea time for a cadet from 36 months in my time to 12 months now. And the providers of virtual reality training and simulators are pushing their flags to actually allow even lesser sea time for people to learn on board. So you go from a cadet to a third officer, or say on the engineering side, in a very short period where you've not had sufficient time, sufficient mentoring time to be actually learning on board. That's one problem. And the second problem is, of course, each ship is different. If you take a chemical tanker, which is only in the North Sea, typically 7 months in a year, the weather is not so great. Do you really get the time for that hands-on training, taking into account that you are on a smaller ship, the weather is bad, the tank cleaning has to be done, the rest hours have to be complied with. So, of course, out there, technology can help in picking up some training, which would have been great on board hands-on, but which should need to be taken with some other method to be able to keep people competent. And also, there is a thing about you mentioned about airlines, right? The severity of an accident pretty much defines the response of IMO and the public towards any accident in any industry. And since their cargo is humans, of course, it's a much stricter regime. And our industry does not react as much to the incidents or even to the near misses. There is enough data available. Every ship in the world in terrestrial AIS is being picked up positions every 20 seconds. And from satellite AIS every 1 hour or so. Yet we still have to develop tools about what are the near misses happening in, just for an example, in Singapore Strait or Dover Strait, or approaches to Shanghai. There is data available, there is knowledge available about these things, but we are not yet at a stage where that can be looked at. We are right now just got a new tool from Vatsala whereby we can take from their first product, we can take the actual situation on board one of our ships of what is happening on the egg disk and actually transport that to our simulators. And it's an amazing, game-changing tool that we now have, because when a typical simulator teacher is building up exercises, now he's just getting the live feed practically, because you could give it to him 1 hour delay and he can upload it into the simulator. Things like this will make a big difference in how we go forward in where and how we teach in the future. But my biggest worry is that the regulatory framework, which by the nature of IMO is a slower moving machine, will that be agile enough? Will we get the right changes done to the next changes in STCW? And remember, the teacher has to remove some things from the present syllabus in order to teach new things. So IMO model courses, which Global Met has been helping in revising a lot of them, they need to be thinking about that too, because when you give something like an IMO model course, 75% of the industry colleges and universities just blindly follow that model course. So at the regulatory framework, we need to get that right. We need to get the syllabus done correctly. We need to encourage more of the modern technology tools and blended learning to come in into the framework to be accepted. Keeping in mind that there is a danger of also overdoing it. So you cannot just keep cutting out seat time on the basis of things done on a simulator or in a virtual reality environment. There is some value to experience too. I mean, there will be more and more decision support systems that technology will provide in every job. There was another question from one of the ships about it, that what can we get for really on-the-job training to be improved. A lot of these decision support systems will help in that. But the overall picture for senior people in the industry and those of us who sit in IMO and in various forums across the world, it's our responsibility now that we get the next STCW revisions done correctly. And getting anything agreed in IMO with 150 countries is, yes, you get the lowest common denominator, no doubt about it. But that's again up to the participants, up to the flags to raise that bar and get it right for the future and take away things which were being done in the past. Thank you.
Captain Pradeep, I just want to reassure the audiences that, in all likelihood, I just really hope that the maritime industry is not prioritizing safety and crew training over the value of the cargo, because we are also responsible for the environment at the same time. I definitely want my future generations to enjoy the ocean with dolphins and everything else at the same time. But Captain Hari, I think Daniel, hold on a second, yeah, Captain Hari, I want to talk about this because just now when Captain Pradeep mentioned about all of the plans and the steps and the all make sense, the directions is there, right? But I think we also have to ask ourselves in the first place, this question is coming up on the screen for the audience, is this: there has always been and there still is a good intention as to why training needs to be done. But over the years, safety incidences still occur. But why is this so? What actually went wrong? And maybe today, we have talked about this early on, Dr. Henderson and Captain Pradeep belated but the point about loss of attention span, too much defocus, a lot of distractions, too many demands on too little crew. So what actually went wrong? What has gone wrong? And what can we do to arrest that, Captain Hari?
I think we have gone past. I mean, the ISM code came into force a long time ago, and that time we were talking of 80% accidents were because of the human error. I hate saying human error because it sounds like a blame thing. Let's say human element. So, and we've come so many years down, and recent studies, statistic analysis have really not shown that kind of heaven and earth improvements. In fact, it's taken a big toll on our seafarers because there's so much of additional paperwork, not to mention all the trees that have been cut down to fund those checklists. But I think now what we have to look moving forward is what is going wrong, how a person reacts in a situation, I think is beyond just training. Training definitely can give you the tools to go in the right way. But a lot on how people react in certain situations go far more down to their roots, ethnicity, upbringing, childhood, girlfriend, a lot of things, And I think what Daniel and his team are doing when I've had the discussions with them, and there are other things out there that AI is using this to actually find that algorithm and study how people behave, why they behave in certain situations, and what are the contributing factors. We've all gone back now to, like, for example, fatigue. It's not just about filling your rest hours. We know fatigue is far more on the mental thing, how much on Facebook, the neighbor's dog died and somebody's going to a dentist and the poor fellow is having so many things to distract himself. We used to have that one novel we used to read from cover to cover, and when we go back to the room, I'm not reading this again, let's just go to sleep. But here the multiple hats the people wear because of social media and the things, they are exposed to so much more other than just shipping and the family front, etc., which keeps them preoccupied. So coming back to it, we can use AI to study deeper into this. I think it is beyond just training. I mean, you can't get blood out of a stone. Yeah. You have to analyze, you have to go a little further, deeper now to analyze why they are behaving like that, and I think AI is a useful tool to study from people, to analyze and create those algorithms to help us study more. Yeah. So I think until we start, and it's never perfect, you have to keep, and it doesn't mean that once AI comes in, zero accidents.
Sure.
We have to keep innovating. People being people will also acclimatize and they will move on, they will evolve, our training methods will evolve. It's going to be a continuous process. Okay. I know the flags are waving for 10 minutes, but again, for airlines industry, the comparisons we make, because the cargo is human, but I would then challenge that by asking, are passenger vessels where the cargo is so-called human?
Obviously.
Are those standards up to airline standards? They may be better than cargo ships and all, but we are not exactly there. So is that the thing, or is it, again, are we talking of mindsets and regulatory things? So that's a good benchmark.
I think that definitely calls for a lot more discussion over a nice drink, and everything else. But Daniel, coming back to you on this, right? You heard Dr. Henderson talking about the future of how it's going to look like, leadership. We talk about simulators. I challenge him on does the industry and shipping take it as seriously as the airline industry? You've heard from Captain Hari, you heard from Captain Pradeep itself. But I think as a training provider, I like the fact that Captain Hari talked about the fact that if you utilize AI, simulators can be as good as the real thing. Now, from a training provider perspective, tell us more about this. Tell us more about how do we see simulators will be used extensively in the future from your viewpoint?
I think it will be, in a short answer, it will be, right? But I think Captain Pradeep brought up a point of reduction in terms of actual sea time, right? I think there should be a minimum sea time that's required to really have the hands-on. Although simulator really today can do a lot of things. If you want to do incidents, response, incident replay, right? You can actually do that in simulator to look at if we had put a certain trainee under a near miss or a very stressful scenario, how will he respond, right? So simulator can do that. And I think just now, Dr. Pradeep also, Captain Pradeep also brought up a point about real-time AIS data. Really, we can even replicate what is happening in Singapore waters with the new simulator technology. So you are navigating a virtual ship, but you are actually facing the real traffic, right? So there are many things that simulator can do. But again, I think we need to recognize the limitation of simulators, whereby the hands-on, the human touch, the whole team's response, the breach resource management part is really something that you need to make sure there's sufficient sea time, there's sufficient face-to-face kind of training. And I think I want to quote an example of also talking about VR, right? There's a lot of hype about VR. Yes, VR, in fact, we are actually researching into VR, a lot of new things that we can actually do in VR, right? But again, in like what you have, the panel has pointed out, it doesn't have the real fire. Right? If you experience the fire in VR, you will take it as a game, right? But again, this is something that we have to address it collectively, right? In the sense that there's no penalty if you fail in VR, right?
So yeah, you're exactly right, because exactly this is where I'm coming from. So don't stop there. Let me just interject a little bit for you, Daniel, because on the screen right now, it's a very apt question from Captain Atul, and he's saying that, Daniel, for us, even with VR, with AI involved in a simulator, are our trainers, and that's an important part of the equation, are our trainers able to deliver the training properly to make that trainee approach that training with a different mindset? And I think it kind of really pretty much wraps up what Dr. Henderson has mentioned before: leadership, a need to want to learn. Captain Pradeep talked about attention span. How do you address the millennials, saying this is why you should do it, not how you should do it. Captain Hari, you talked about this before, that I can't even tell my daughter to do something. How do you go about doing it? So at the end of the day, maybe, Daniel, for you, perhaps it would be timely for us to maybe hear from a experienced training provider on, with AR, with simulators, do you think, and rightly asked by Captain Atul here, do you really think that our trainers will play just as an important role? They should not be diminished when it comes to a point in time where simulators and virtual reality takes over a live person.
Yeah, I think from a trainer's perspective, right, if you are talking about trainer within Institute of Higher Learning that actually provides training, I think the mindset is also changing in the sense that how do we embrace technology to really enhance the safety of or this training standard of our crew, right? So I think the question asked about human element, right? I think human element is important, but I think the challenge is how do we quantify human element? This is where research comes in. Like what Captain Hari has alluded to, right? How do we define certain behavior, right? This is where a research institution together with the training institution, which is SMA, Singapore Maritime Academy, this is what we are looking into. So the mindset is very important. Our trainers has to change their mindset with training for new technology. And again, I think the mindset from a company perspective when they are looking at their students is important. It's important to cascade down all the way from the CEO level, just to echo Dr. Henderson's point, that it's a culture, it's a safety culture that everyone's mindset has to change for us to embrace changes, embrace new technologies. I think this is something that as an industry we must strive for. Yeah.
Daniel, so that's great. I'm not going to let you go because we've just enough time for just one last question. This is and it's kind of maybe perhaps for you to also help us to bring up to where we are today, right? So how do you see that changing mindset towards modern training methodologies will help? Because the future will bring more and more millennials to the office in terms of leadership roles. How do you see that changing from a training provider perspective?
Okay, I think coming back to the attention span that was brought up, right? Your attention span is a few seconds because of TikTok. You just swipe, right? Yeah. So I think from a training institute perspective, we are actually going down not only the bite-sized learning, we're going down to bit-sized learning. So bit is even smaller than bytes, right? How do we actually split training into really mini courses whereby within a short attention span, we are able to really put something in place, get the key messages across. This is something that the training institution will have to do. I think that's one. I think second part is really about training methodology for millennium, right? I think it's like Dr. Harry has pointed out, it's difficult to get your daughter to sit down and do something, right?
Yes.
So I think gamification is something that's interesting. Right. In fact, we have actually tried out VR training for our diploma students, which is their age is about 15 years old. And then it's very, I think the response was very positive. And they like it. They feel that this is the way to go. So I think it's about educating the industry, educating millennium that maritime industry is indeed an exciting industry as well. There will be opportunities for you to interact with technologies to understand, because future when there's more automation, new skill set that's needed. So shipping, we have to look at it from a different perspective. So I think that's something that collectively as an industry, as leaders in the industry, as CEOs, we have to start to build this mindset and we move forward as an industry. Yeah.
If I can quickly jump in,
yes, go ahead.
Time. I think it's important we are close to winding. Training is never one size fits all.
Yeah.
And the moment you make it one size fits all, it's like trying to pour some medicine down an unwilling throat, and that's when this thing takes place. So with these innovations coming up with AI, I think we are learning to adapt that. We're going to have different ways of doing it, and there will be different ways of delivery, and perhaps the trainee can choose which has their best attention span.
Great. Thank you, Harry. I'm afraid for the audience and also for the rest of us in this location here, we just have barely enough time to finish off. We've got less than a second left, 45 seconds left to go. But I want to first of all thank the panel, Dr. Henderson, Captain Pradeep, Captain Hari, and Daniel for being here today, and also the audience. Your questions were fast and furious, and hopefully we're able to actually answer a lot of them for you at the same time. So thank you for doing that. And but I think I'd like to wrap up with a couple of things. And number one is pretty much the fact that we know that change is a constant. We have to deal with it. You can't avoid it. And the second part is that you can't avoid the fact that our workforce is going to change. And pretty much so that the millennials have a different way of doing things. Yes, I think all of us in the room I can see the nods and naysayers and all the gray-haired Captain Sea Spray and Chief Engineer Greasy Hands. Oh, no, we got to get things like that. But we have to live with it. We have to embrace the new way of doing things because it's important for us. It's important because if we take training seriously, if we're able to blend in between the human element touch, the attention span that we get for them, gamification and so on, I think that will do wonders for us. It will do a lot of justification and to preserve our name at shipping and the maritime space itself. So that's all we have for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Poon, and esteemed panelists for your insights and a most interesting discussion. And that brings us to the end of Plenary 2 for the International Safety at Sea Conference. Now, we would like to get your views on today's session. We hope that you can take a few minutes to complete a feedback form that will pop up later when you exit this webinar. And last but not least, you can take part in our quiz to win an Amazon gift voucher worth 50 Singapore dollars. To qualify, just scan the QR code or click on the link posted in the chat window at the bottom of your screen. Answer all the questions correctly, and you could be one of the lucky winners randomly drawn per session. All the best and good luck! Do join us tomorrow for the International Chemical and Oil Pollution Conference, where we discuss future-proofing marine environment protection in a changing landscape for Plenary 1, taking place at 2:30 p.m. Singapore time, and navigating the increased complexity of incident management for Plenary 2, happening at 5 p.m. Singapore time. And on that note, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.